Hey, welcome to the Poor Sports Seattle podcast. It's Casey McLean. I'm back. I thought I was going to be back last Thursday, and it didn't work out. I had a busy, very busy weekend, by the way. On Thursday, I did this crazy show. I've done it now 2 times at the Elma, I don't know, some county fairgrounds in Elma, Washington, whatever that's called. The last time I did it, I was on the back of a hay bale trailer, which was like just bizarre. Hold on, let me get this. I gotta get this banner going. I gotta get you out watching my stand-up special. By the way, it's still out there, over 50,000 views. It's called "Do Not Shake" on my YouTube channel at Casey McLean Comedy. Did a show on the back of a hay bale trailer, and then I went down and helped my buddy Andrew Slater record an album and what I think will be a special. Andrew's a very funny comic, past guest of this podcast, and also has I think I said this last week, if not, the absolute coolest credit of any comedian, the most enviable credit to me of any comedian, which is that he was one of very few people that has the credit that he wrote on the Norm Macdonald sports show. How cool is that? Let me make sure my audio and stuff is coming through the right channel. I had a little bit of an issue right as we were starting. All right. So today we are going to talk about the Mariners start of the season, the Cal Raleigh extension. That's why it was upsetting to not talk, by the way, on Thursday, because it was opening day and Cal Raleigh was extended the day before, and maybe it was 2 days before, but it was before opening day. It was sad to not get to talk about that stuff in closer to real time. We're going to talk about both those things. We're going to talk about what the Mariners are doing that's different, what they're doing that's the same, and see if we can analyze any patterns. It's early. It's 4 games in. And I got to tell you, the early returns on this season, our fans have not learned to temper their reactions. Also, I will say, I didn't go to any games. I was busy the whole weekend, but from all reports that I've seen, it seems like this threat of fans losing enthusiasm over the team was not an empty threat. More empty seats. I don't know I don't know if we'll ever know TV ratings again, frankly, now that Root Sports has that app, but it seems like the Mariners have actually finally alienated the fan base, to some degree, and we'll have to win them back. So yeah, we'll talk about those things, and then we're going to do it's going to be a slightly shorter episode today, probably because I need to get some other stuff done, but we'll do the mock draft simulation. We'll go over some comments from the last one. A lot of comments, a lot of people frustrated, which, by the way, I used to write about sports. I used to write mock drafts every year, and I'm no stranger to people not. That's the thing about sports, is if you're projecting something in the future, it's because there are more than like 1 or 2 possible outcomes, because there's more than 2. It's not a binary outcome, right? Especially with the draft. The Seahawks could draft any variety of these guys. There's probably realistically like, I don't know, 10, 15 guys that are on their radar and available at that spot that will likely be available at 18 and at their future picks. Like, it's not an unlimited array of people in reality. In theory, it could be, but there's going to be a lot of disagreement, and that's fine. But we'll go over those comments and then get into the mock draft, because the comments, most of them were pretty fun. Even the ones that were critical, I thought were mostly pretty fun. So we will get into that. So let's start with the Cal Raleigh extension. 6 years, $105 million, a 28-year-old catcher. And my first instinct, I'll be completely honest with you, my first instinct was, I don't like that. Not a fan of 6 years, especially, by the way that the Mariners have used, and I would argue abused, Cal Raleigh the last couple of years. I assumed that the Mariners were going to be moving on from Cal Raleigh the way that they were handling him, the playing time they were giving him. I assumed that at some point they would be moving on from him via trade. I had not caught that Cal Raleigh left the Scott Boras agency or whatever. So that was another element that I just thought there was no way. Boris just doesn't do pre-arbitration extensions or pre-free agency extensions. And I thought that might be something that would stop the Mariners from re-signing Cal Raleigh. And then he went to whatever new agency, signs this 6-year, $105 million deal. And I hope that the Mariners use this opportunity to start treating Cal Raleigh like a guy they want to be healthy into his mid-30s, because they now own his rights into his mid-30s. And if you want him to be healthy, I don't think that guy can be catching 130 games a year going into his 30s. What did he catch last year? Let's get the actual numbers. 135 games caught, 125 started. The year before, 128 caught, 114 started. Like, I would like to see, if you're a person that believes the Mariners have any kind of a master plan, which I have many doubts about, I could envision a master plan for the Mariners, including Cal Raleigh starting to take some of his plate appearances as a DH and as a first baseman. And I think that if the Mariners are going to keep Cal Raleigh healthy, and especially, by the way, if they plan on being a playoff team and having him be healthy in the playoffs, they got to start spelling him at least the amount of innings he's catching, I think. And he's one of the team's better hitters. I would love to see him down around 110 games caught each year. And then whatever that is after that, first base is a little easier to justify. First off, the team does not really have a first baseman on the roster. They have Rowdy Tellez, who's like a DH. They have Donovan Solano, who's like a utility infielder, but certainly not a prototypical first baseman. They have Luke Raley, who's an outfielder, but they have depth at these spots that's forced these guys to depth is maybe not even the right word. They have depth and other roster issues that have created a logjam at some of these spots. And because of that, they have some plate appearances that are going to guys like, if Luke Raley's playing first base, he's probably better as an outfielder. It's a little scary to me to have your catcher, your typical starting catcher, your best catcher be a DH, because if your other catcher gets hurt and you got to pull him out of the DH spot, now you lose the DH. I will say that's one game. So if you have to deal with it for one game, it's not the worst thing in the world. If you have to have a pitcher lay down a sac bunt, one game, one plate appearance, 2 plate appearances, so be it. If that's worth the roster flexibility, or especially if it's worth keeping Cal Raleigh healthy, which I do think it is, then fine. I'd like to see him play less games at catcher and stay healthier. The other thing I will say, first off, let's pull up this contract, because I don't think it's that crazy. We're gonna. So. I'm so used to, I'm like so conditioned to talk about stuff in terms of cap hits. But as far as like actual cash goes, it doesn't get crazy until 2028. And then it's $23 million cash, $24.666 million on payroll. The luxury tax number is $17.5 million. The Mariners aren't threatening the luxury tax, so that doesn't really matter, but yeah, it's like they get a couple years of cost-controlled years of they buy out Cal's arbitration years, and I mean, so if Cal Raleigh can be, let's get to this. My initial reaction is no way a catcher. It's got to be very rare for a catcher to stay healthy and hit well into his mid-30s. And I pulled up a list of, so these are all catchers, ages 30 plus, seasons where catchers were age 30 plus and had an OPS plus, they played over half their games at catcher. I believe I set the minimum threshold for plate appearances at 250, and their OPS plus. So not my favorite stat in the world, but one that we can use for this purpose. There have been 119 seasons where a man over 30 played since 1990, I should say. Another caveat. Since 1990, there have been 119 seasons where a catcher over 30 had at least 250 plate appearances and had at least 50% of his plate appearances be as a catcher. That's the criteria. If you'd asked me what percentage of those guys have an OPS plus over 100, I'd have been like, I don't know, 25? About 75% are 100 and up. OPS plus, any stat you see with a plus on the end means that it's relative to average. So for pitchers, ERA plus, you want to be below ERA. You want to be below 100. 100 is average. In this case, 100 is average, and about 75%. A little higher. 90 out of 119 catchers who played a season in their 30s, an age 30 plus season, had 250 plus plate appearances, and played over 50% of their games as a catcher, had an OPS plus over 100. I thought it would have degraded their games faster. That gave me a little bit of hope, I will say, that Cal Raleigh isn't going to just completely collapse. I think his body and his profile can last into it. Like if he was just him, if he was just DHing, he could last into his 30s, no problem. As a catcher, it's tough. I hope that the Mariners, like I said, have some plans to find ways to rest Cal Raleigh's knees. And, in recent years, also his hands. But overall, it's not as risky of a contract as I thought it would be. Cal Raleigh's been one of the best catchers in baseball for several years now, for 3 years now. And so, great. And if that means that this pitching staff starts to re-sign, if you start to see Logan Gilbert re-sign and George Kirby re-sign and the young guys re-sign, I think that it spells a good future for the Mariners. If you are willing to believe the Mariners have a master plan, which I have my serious doubts that they do, that they're not going into each offseason reacting to the previous season too much. Too much meaning like this year they react by going, well, we were one game out of the playoffs. Why not? Why would we spend that much money? I think it maybe bodes well that they're willing to, if you're going to spend your resources on something, keeping the very good players that you already have is one of the better options. Let's talk about those very Mariners. They split their first series against the Athletics, the No City Athletics. You can't talk about what team they play for or what city they play in. There's a couple trends. So, I immediately saw 3 games in, there's already people who are ready to run Julio out of town, people who are already pissed off about the season. And I got to tell you, I think part of the reason for that is because I think people are conditioned for football. And in football, every single game matters so much. And in baseball, it's just not that way. Now, every game matters some, obviously. And there are things that you would have wanted to see from this Mariners team early on to kind of assuage your worry about the bad offensive Mariners coming back. And it's always funny to me. It remains funny to me after the offseason we had, after the Mike Petriello StatCast article came out, that people still are blown away that the Mariners can have a great pitching performance in a ballpark that suppresses offense and a bad offensive performance and not assume those things are each to some degree connected to each other, to the ballpark. Obviously. To me, there's nothing about what Julio has done so far that's he's walking a lot so far. That's good. 3 walks in 4 games. Ryan Bliss also walking a lot, but we saw Ryan Bliss walk a lot to start his 2024 stretch with the Mariners. And then that went away. When pitchers started to learn that he's not a power hitter, they don't have to necessarily throw him. They don't necessarily have to be so careful pitching to Ryan Bliss. He started not to walk as much. I would assume it was because he saw more strikes. That's actually pretty easy to demonstrate through stats, and I'm assuming that's the case. but I haven't actually looked it up. What I did find some stuff that I think is worth, like some trends that are worth talking about. Real quickly, I'm going to share. So this is the Mariners pitching staff pitch types, their velocity, and this one that I'm going to show right now, this is the pitch types, their usage frequency. According to StatCast's pitch type definitions. So a couple of these guys we haven't seen pitch. Also, I'm going to give a couple caveats. It's one game. There could be errors or noise in the pitch type identification. There could be one specific thing that I wanted to try to isolate for that I didn't have time to figure out on this is home stats versus away stats last year. So we see Brian Wu, 24-25, goes from throwing his sinker 23% of the time to 36.8% of the time. Empirically, watching that game, that's what it felt like, is that he was throwing his sinker a lot. Now, is that because the A's had a different handedness composition than the average? Is that because he pitches differently at home than on the road because of what Safeco or what T-Mobile Park rewards? I couldn't isolate those things. But Brian Wu, sinker, up from 23 to almost 37%. Bryce Miller, sinker, up from 17 to almost 29%. Luis Castillo even. Smaller jump, but 18% to 19%. Probably, to me, that's probably not exactly worth caring about. And then, we saw like Logan Gilbert empirically threw his splitter a bunch. It looks like most of that was at the expense of a cutter he was throwing in 2027 or in 2024. He bumped up the splitter, didn't throw a sinker according to StatCast, and the splitter was working. He was nasty. We also have not seen yet this year Andres Munoz changeup, and I'm very interested in watching how that changeup evolves because so it's a kick change, which I watched a pitching ninja video on what a kick change is. I used to pitch. I was fastball curveball guy, and I would throw like the straightest change, like nearly a palm ball. Remember palm balls? I don't have enormous hands. I don't have super long arms. My fastball was like low 80s at the very best. I had a very good curveball, I will say that, but I did not have a dominant fastball by any means. Circle change was hard for me to throw because of how big my hands were. I had a hard time controlling a circle change. So I started throwing a 3-finger changeup, like nearly a palm ball, and I would throw it and just kind of let it roll off the back of my hands. And that allowed me to have full arm motion, and if you choke a ball in the back of your grip, it's less velocity, and it would have four-seam fastball motion. This kick change is interesting because it is designed to allow supinators. So there's, oh my God, what's the other one? Pronators and supinators. Pronators, turn your hand to the outside of your frame. That's pronating your arm. Supinators is the palm of your hand facing inside. I was a supinator. I could never get movement on a changeup. And the kick change is almost like a knuckle curve where, and I'll show it on the thing, where you hold it with a finger spiked up, and through the throwing motion, it just tilts the axis so that you don't get a ton of motion, but it's got like a knuckleball. I don't think it actually has a knuckleball effect. Like it doesn't knuckle, but it has a very slow spin, very slow side spin, but side spin that is turning away from you, like a pronated arm would create. If that wasn't confusing enough, interesting pitch, interested to see how it'll work out. It opens up a pitch shape to pitchers that can't pronate well, which would have been me, by the way. And at that time, I felt very lucky when I was growing up to grow up in a time where I could study pitching mechanics and basically be a guy that like would not have made my high school team to a guy that was like a decent pitcher. Not great, but so the Andres Munoz has not thrown that pitch yet, but the early, like the reports from spring training were, like, I think Julio Rodriguez called it the best pitch he's seen. That'll be very interesting to watch what Andres Munoz does with that. Has not thrown it yet. His stuff is right around the same. A lot of these stats, rate stats, whatever, they don't stabilize very quickly. So I don't think it's super. I'm not gonna jump off a bridge over Julio not having a high batting average or having a higher strikeout rate, or even celebrate that he's got a high walk rate, because he does have a higher walk rate right now, but it's 4 games. It's 3 walks. Some of this stuff, pitch usage, it's obviously in the pitcher's control, but maybe it can be like an early indicator of a strategic shift. I will tell you, I'll bring this back up on the screen. Velocity changes are always interesting. So we see Andres Munoz at the top, 24 to 25. His fastball's up 0.6 miles an hour. His sinker is up 0.8 miles an hour. His slider is up 0.7 miles an hour. Andres Munoz has a little more velocity than he did on average last year. Now, is that because he feels great coming out of spring, and as the season goes on, he'll slowly and gradually lose velocity? That's possible. Brian Wu, up just a tad on his four-seam fastball, down like up 0.3 miles an hour on his four-seamer, down 0.2 on his sinker, and actually up 1.6 on his slider. But I wonder if, again, this is like, there's potential for pitch type classification issues. I don't think he threw a ton of sliders. He didn't throw a ton of changeups. So I'm not stressing all that very much. Bryce Miller actually goes down a little bit on his four-seam fastball, 0.5 miles an hour. He's down a little bit on his sinker. He's down 0.1 on his slider, and his splitter is just about the same, up 0.2. None of that's worrisome. What I will say is Luis Castillo, 95.6 mile an hour fastball down to 94.4. Sinker, 95.6 down to 94.2. Sliders down also. Changeups down also. That's potentially worrisome. That's a decent chunk of velocity. And that's, by the way, why if they were going to trade anyone in the offseason, Luis Castillo made the most sense. Not saying I'm running Luis Castillo out of town. Also, Luis Castillo had a rough outing. He had the worst outing of any of the starters that went for the Mariners, who get outscored, I think it was 14-8 in the series and end up splitting it. But Luis Castillo has easily the worst outing from a starting pitcher. And again, there's no part of the results that I think are worrisome yet. I'm not worried about Luis Castillo because of one kind of rough outing. I'm not thrilled about Andres Munoz because, I mean, these guys, the best we know is that they are who they were last year. Nothing about this year has said, except for velocity stabilizes a lot more quickly. And I will be watching Luis Castillo I'm hoping he will regain that velocity, because a guy that's in his age, that's starting to be worrisome, you know? Okay. Should we do, how long have we gone? We got, okay, let's do this. Did I have anything else I wanted to talk about with the Mariners? Only that the Twins sold for $1.7 billion. And we don't know that the Mariners are for sale. There's a lot of people that want the Mariners to be sold, that want the John Stanton and co. to not own the Mariners anymore. I will say, not so much that I think that Major League Baseball it's certainly not more popular than, basketball. We just saw the Celtics sell for $6 billion. I don't know what the next, I don't have a great example off the top of my head of a smaller market team that's sold recently in basketball, but it's going to be hard to find someone with $6 billion if that's what it costs to expand in the NBA. If you want the Mariners to be sold, they're probably a lot more reasonable at this point than so we could see realistically, I think, both of the two biggest Seattle sports franchises, the Mariners and the Seahawks, both get sold in the next couple of years, and Sonics expansion happen. And between the Seahawks and the Sonics, we could be talking about more than $10 billion. The Mariners, maybe slightly more affordable. Does this matter to you in any way? Not really to me. I mean, it's a little worrisome that the baseball's lagging this far behind as a baseball fan, but like as a Mariners fan, it means nothing to me. I think it probably means that they are. It doesn't change how likely they are to move, I guess, is the biggest thing. And that's the only trauma that I'm trying to avoid is having another team that I love move. I don't think it'll happen based on that. I think they'll be more affordable. There should be local support, enough local money to keep the Mariners here at the very minimum. Nobody's even talking about that, by the way. This isn't like some rumor you've missed out on. I'm just working through my own trauma on here. Okay, let's get into this. We're going to do this mock draft. Actually, before we do this one, we're going to do we're going to restart this. I wanted to make sure that we were not screwing ourselves. We're going to do the mock draft database, mock draft today. Just so we are out of I don't want to always be looking at the same big board and the same ratings. And today I'm going to try to continue to ease towards like what I would like the Seahawks to do, and what I think is realistic as far within the framework of who they like to draft and who I like and who will actually be available. So if we get to pick 18 and Cam Ward's available, I'll note it, and I'm not going to take Cam Ward because I don't think he'll actually be available. Also, Pro Football Focus's mock draft simulator has Tate Ratledge available at 92 a lot of the time. It's pretty unlikely, I think, that he'll be available at 92. They have Quinn Ewers available at like 170 something, probably over 50% of the time. Pick 172 that the Seahawks have? That's probably not going to happen either. It would be my guess. I think Quinn Ewers probably goes in the second or early third round. So we're going to start pushing in that direction. Previously, we've been using those simulators and assuming that what was happening on those simulators was right, and that like everything that was on them was absorbing the intel of their rankings would be like the equivalent of a GM absorbing the intel from the rest of the league and using that to determine when he had to pick a player that he wanted. I don't know that that's how John Schneider does anything. He seems to not care about what round he's in and where a player is expected to be picked. He just picks the player he has next on his board, which I actually respect and agree with as a process. But last week's video got a decent amount of traffic, and there were some comments, and I'm gonna respond to these comments, folks. This is probably a bad idea, but we're gonna do it. So first, official Meech one, and by the way, I don't know who any of these people are. I think to a person. He says, I like that Tate Ratledge dude at 50 and possibly a receiver at 52. I think that's probably right. I think Ratledge at 50 not only would be good, and by the way, relative athletic score off the charts, basically. Yeah, I think a great fit for the Seahawks, especially if they don't draft an offensive lineman in the first round. In that draft, I had drafted Kelvin Banks in the first round. If we don't draft Kelvin Banks, then fine. This Rogers 1161 person commented a couple times. I'm not quite sure what some of them are in reference to. I trust in John, and John we trust. I don't care about. I have no loyalty to John Schneider in any way outside of the fact that he brought a Super Bowl here. But yeah, he's deserving of criticism as much as anyone else. I liked Pete Carroll, but I wanted Pete Carroll gone by the time he left. Pete Carroll's a legend in the city. He should be in the Ring of Honor and name a street after him. I mean, really name a street after him. If you got Edgar and Dave Niehaus, we should have a Pete Carroll. Yeah, there's no Pete Carroll Street, right? Don't wait till he's dead either. Let's let Pete Carroll walk on Pete Carroll Boulevard. Gregory Ross 9365 says best analysis around. My self-esteem makes me think that's got to be sarcasm. So this is where it starts to fall apart for this Rodgers fella. I'm not so could draft best player and if running back, make a trade for one, draft a blah blah blah. I don't want him to draft a running back. Even if Ashton Genty's there, I don't want them to draft a running back. I'm not quite sure what he's saying. I definitely agree with drafting best player available. I think Kelvin Banks, to me, was arguably the best player available there. This person's, Rodgers again says, like Joey Galloway or Brian Blades. I'm not quite, I assume he was referencing like he was either talking about the special teams players and these two guys, Brian Blades and Joey Galloway, having some return ability, maybe, or just like responding in real time to a thing that was recorded in advance and that he wasn't watching live. All that being said, Joey Galloway's very good. Brian Blades very good. Galloway, I think we talked about this. I think a couple weeks ago. Could it be argued he was a disappointment in Seattle? Another thing that I talked about is, and this is going to come up a couple times. So Heisenberg 1732 says Bobo and Restrepo, the two slowest receivers in the NFL. Quite a roster, and Kupp ran a 4.6 8 years and an ACL ago. So here's my response was, I recorded this when Restrepo hadn't finished running his 40, but he had started. And the joke there is he ran like a 4.8 40. So when I recorded this last week, that 40 had not been run. I think Restrepo's probably, I don't necessarily think he's off the Seahawks board, but maybe, because I do think they factor in stuff like his measurables, his long speed. But do I think Restrepo is still in play at 50 or 52, whatever I took him at? No, very obviously not. Siggy Jacobs said, listen to the first round or first couple of minutes, and you're still talking too long. You're gonna hate this one, Siggy Jacobs. I'm sorry. There's more from this Rodgers fellow. What does he say? If anything, they want to stick to the run game, pound the rock. These like run-on sentences. I don't understand how there are people with enough keyboard skills to type something like this out. It's possible this person's doing voice to text. That's just something that's available. They have that much, but they don't know enough to put a goddamn period or a comma so it's readable. TRX Media says you took a third slot receiver. LOL. You could have took Savion Williams in the third. I actually did take Savion Williams in the third. He had stopped watching by then. Okay. I didn't. So basically, this person says they want someone that like a Walter Jones / Steve Hutchinson. They want that combination on the left side of the offensive line. Yeah, of course. So does every team in the NFL. The Seahawks are not unique in wanting two Hall of Fame talents. The amount that people underestimate how hard it was to keep or to acquire and retain Walter Jones and Steve Hutchinson, and they didn't retain Steve Hutchinson. It's always unnerving to me. Those two dudes were all-time great talents at their positions. Very difficult. Obviously, if there was a Steve Hutchinson available, every team would be willing to draft that guy in the first round. This Rodgers now says he thinks I'm full of it. There's a lot of comments from this Rodgers fella. He's got a lot of comments, much like another Rodgers fella that I'm aware of. Bradford won't work in our system. I would take Grant at 18, though. I assume he's talking about Anthony Bradford. And I agree. I think that's going to be a tough fit. I like Kenneth Grant. I talked about it in this video. I might take Kenneth Grant today. Restrepo is an awful pick there. And I said, it's bad 40. People don't like the idea of the Seahawks taking another slot receiver, but it might happen because this is the kind of guy in the West Coast offense that they used to. It's like a more traditional West Coast offense than we've been used to seeing for several years, for probably over a decade, maybe since like the Darrell Bevel era. And I think we're just going to see a lot more of these guys that are not 6'5", that don't run 4.35, that don't jump out of the stadium, and that's fine as long as the passing game is productive. We saw this. Okay, and then lastly, this was the one. I'm glad it came in order last. It said, "Dude, stop reaching for picks and take what the draft gives you. That means Grant instead of Banks. You talk way too much. Can't watch your channel. It's cringeworthy. Well, you'll never see this, Tom. But first off, I don't need you to keep watching the channel. Move on. Watch somebody else. There's plenty of great people. Am I going to tell you I'm the best? This should be it for entertainment. And also, is it entertaining to just watch me? What kind of ASMR bullshit would it be to just watch me go through mock drafts, not talk about them, and just take the highest player rated by PFF and not have an opinion of my own? So, that's like watching an unboxing video. You know what to expect at that point? Yeah, I'm going to give you my opinion on stuff. So now we'll get into it. This won't be on the clip. So, what's your name? Fuck, I can't remember which guy it was, but whoever it is, you're not going to get your long lead up or as long of a lead up as was possible. Okay. Now we will finally go to the mock draft database simulator, and we are going to start the draft. We're going to start the Seahawks. I can't remember what I don't think you can change the speed on this one, so I'm going to go normal so that we don't completely bog this down. Okay, so we're going to enter our draft room. Here we are with all of our beautiful picks, and we will start this one out. So one thing that I don't like is I would like to be able to go back up easily and see what other teams have picked. If there was a more obvious scroll bar on here, I think I can like drag it over. So in this case, the Titans took Shedeur Sanders first. That would be surprising. I mean, if they took Shedeur Sanders, you would have to assume the reason would be because they planned on... I don't think that Shedeur Sanders wants to play there. Unless that's part of the most recent comments that Dion has made about not caring where he goes, not wanting to intervene on where he goes because he wants him to get drafted 1 overall. But I mean, everything I've read and heard is that the league is not as high on him as they are on Cam Ward. So I don't think that's realistic, but I don't think it's completely unrealistic to see two quarterbacks in the first 3 picks. All right, get back to the Seahawks pick. So Kelvin Banks went already. They have Kenneth Grant ranked 22nd. They have Jihad Campbell's interesting to me, and I've had to have a little bit of a what would you say, like a revival? I've had to face my own biases on guys like Jihad Campbell and guys like Abdul Carter, the dude, I can't remember what Javon Walker, that's not it. Jalen Walker from Georgia. These guys who are like off-ball linebackers converted into edge rushers. My bias comes from the Seahawks and Aaron Curry, where they were like, he could be either. He could be off-ball linebacker. I mean, at the time, we called it an off-ball or an outside linebacker. We called it a middle or an outside linebacker at the time. Now we've come up with new terms to make things more complicated. More descriptive, but also more complicated. Anyways, there's some thought that Jihad Campbell could play both those spots also. I'm inclined to take him there. He kind of solves 2 problems for you, which is you need a little bit of linebacker depth. You need a little bit of edge depth. He could move positions. If you think he's the kind of football guy that can move positions, like he can know enough of the game plan for both positions to kind of be able to bounce back and forth. But a guy that can be all over the field like that, I would assume if you're taking him in the first round, you view him a little bit more as an edge rusher. Oh, man. I'm going to take Jihad Campbell, and people are not going to like it, but I think if you take Jihad Campbell, you have him as a guy who's going to be primarily, not exclusively, but primarily an edge rusher and a guy who maybe moves over on specific downs and specific scenarios. Got a B+, starting out with a passing grade. I like Kenneth Grant a lot. If Kenneth Grant, I don't think he's going to fall. I mean, he doesn't fall to the Seahawks here. I certainly don't think he's going to fall to the Seahawks in the second round. He's a guy that would be like a very, very high priority for me. Now we're in a position where I like Ariante Ursary. I'm going to take Ariante Ursary, but I'm going to talk for a minute because if I could go back and do it all again, knowing that Landon Jackson, who's another guy that I have high on my list, a guy that's got great athletic traits, that's got great size and has versatility along the defensive line in this system. If I knew he was going to be available here, I probably wouldn't have taken Jihad Campbell because I would have wanted Landon Jackson. I would rather have had Landon Jackson and Kenneth Grant than Jihad Campbell and Ariante Ursary here, that's what I'm going to take. I might have even been able to get all three because Ursary might not go to Denver at 51 here. I like Ursary. I think he can move in to play guard. I think he can play tackle if Abraham Lucas isn't healthy and if Charles Cross is not in the Seahawks' future plans. So I'm taking Ursary. I've liked Ursary since before the draft process started. Man, Landon Jackson sticks again. I mean, it might just be on. Let's take a look at how they have the quarterbacks ranked here. Because if I'm the Seahawks, I'd be considering Quinn Ewers here. I'd be considering Jalen Milroe, frankly. Like if they like Milroe, I'd be considering him here because I think that he's a guy who could play some downs this year. Like I talked to Bryce Coots about, I think he's a guy that could play some downs this year. So I like Milroe. Man, just because they have him ranked 90, I think realistically, I don't think that Quinn Ewers is a lock to make it to 82. If he's still there at 82, I'm probably taking Quinn Ewers. But do I take Landon Jackson? If I'm just going best player available, which is probably what I should be doing, I'm taking Landon Jackson. I think one thing that does for you to take Jihad Campbell in the first round is it gives you the opportunity to evaluate Tyrese Knight without the bias of knowing you're probably going to have to play him for a bunch of downs this year. Okay. Man. So quarterback still on the board. Ewers goes. Where did Ewers go? That's upsetting. I will tell you that's upsetting to me. Ewers goes number 71 to New Orleans. So I've failed us because Ewers was like the last guy that I was really enthusiastic about as a quarterback. People like Will Howard. I'm not as high on Will Howard. I'm probably getting a little bit caught up in the run here. I'm going to get a good grade on this because he's ranked 67 on the mock draft database big board. I don't have him I wouldn't have him that high. I don't have a big board. I want you to know. In the way they have their quarterback rankings set up, I don't have him that high in the quarterback rankings. I don't have a 300-person big board. Sorry to tell you. I haven't been hiding that from you. I'm going to take Will Howard here because he's the next. I mean, I just am not enthusiastic about anyone until Curtis Rourke, and I'm worried about Rourke not being athletic enough to be successful in the modern NFL. So we're taking Will Howard. I get an A, but I'm not happy about it. It feels like an A that I cheated off someone else's paper, to be honest with you. So Tate Ratledge is still here. He's probably not going to be here at 92, but if he is, I think it's going to be really hard for the Seahawks not to pick him. Frankly, I'd be interested in Isaiah Bond, and I don't give a shit what any of you think about the Seahawks drafting another slot receiver. I think they're going to have receivers with this profile for a while. For as long as Clint Kubiak is here, I think that you're going to see this profile of us, not Isaiah Bond, by the way. Isaiah Bond is like kind of a all or nothing vertical threat, but a guy who profiles as that like small, short, shifty, whatever bullshit adjectives you want to use. Harold Fannin Jr. I would consider here, but I mean Tate Ratledge. I just can't pass up on Tate Ratledge at 92. And I get another A+. We're having, by the way, according to this, to Mock Draft Database, we're having just a banner draft. Maybe the best draft of any team. I mean, it's hard to imagine a team with 3 A+, an A, and a B+. Restrepo, by the way, he ends up going right there. Like I said earlier, my guess is Xavier Restrepo falls to like 5th or 6th round at the earliest. That's just an impossible 40 time to reconcile, I think. Reconcile. That's not revival. Reconcile. I think that's what I've the word I was trying to think of earlier. Terrence Ferguson, a lot of people like. He's probably going to be my pick here. I like Jared Ivey also, despite not having and I like Savion Jones. Man, this is tough. Have not taken a receiver. So, yeah, I'm gonna go against what I literally just said. I think Savion Jones has enough. No, not fuck it. I was thinking of not Savion Jones. It's the purple got me. That's a TCU. Savion Williams. Is that right? Yeah. Jeez. That's embarrassing. Have at me, comments. Yeah, Savion Williams is the guy that I was thinking of. Jesus. Well, that simplifies things. I'm definitely taking Terrence Ferguson. I like Jared Ivey. I'd be considering him at different points if I hadn't taken Landon Jackson and Jihad Campbell. I think those guys, you have maybe, a lot now, a lot of early draft capital expended on pass rush. So I'm going to take Terrence Ferguson as a guy who maybe steps in immediately and takes the Noah Fant role. I think it's possible A.J. Barner gets the most snaps next year at tight end, regardless of if Noah Fant's on the roster or not, because he's a better blocker than Noah Fant. But I think that drafting a guy like Terrence Ferguson, and if you can get him at 137, you're stoked. Yeah, I think that would be a big win for the Seahawks to be able to go save the money, to have a guy with a comparable profile, a very athletic receiving profile from a tight end. Yeah, another A+, baby. You can't tell me nothing now, commenters, because mock draft database has graded me strong. They're mostly grading on value, I think. Value and need, and not necessarily scheme fit. So you guys can bitch about the scheme fit of some of these guys. We still don't have a receiver. I'm gonna see if he's available for pick 234. I'm gonna pull a guy if he's available in this. He's not on the PFF big board. That's how obscure of a guy this is. But a guy who I would have as a priority UDFA, but a guy that I would want the Seahawks to take a flyer on with their last pick if he's still available. Elijah Roberts is interesting. Again, Dante Thornton's interesting because of the athletic profile. A guy that I would certainly consider. Let's see. Are there any other running backs that I like? Brashard Smith. I think I'm probably going to take Brashard Smith here as a guy who he's a converted receiver, good athletic numbers, gives the Seahawks something they don't really have, which is a guy who can truly run some routes as a receiver, as opposed to a guy that's just catching checkdowns and maybe doing something with them. Yeah, that's who I'm taking. But I have 175, and I don't think my suspicion is he still makes it to 175, but yeah, Noel Williams will probably be the pick. The Seahawks, I should have probably drafted a corner earlier. I got too excited to draft. I probably should have drafted. Yeah, see, that's where it starts to fall apart. It's if I could have gone Kenneth Grant, Landon Jackson, whatever corner was available, I guarantee you there was a good corner available at 52. And then Tate Ratledge, or I guess in this case it would have if I could go back and redo it again, I would have gone Kenneth Grant in the first. I would have gone Landon Jackson at 50, a corner at 52. Quinn Ewers at 82, Tate Ratledge at 92, and then Terrence Ferguson there probably. And so the guy that I'm taking out of that is Jihad Campbell, the first overall pick, which is frustrating because now I've already criticized my own first overall pick. We're going to take Noel Williams. Okay. So, and now here's where I'm going to take, I was going to be so mad if, I don't think he went, did he? Brashard Smith, baby. You are a Seattle Seahawk. And I get tied for my worst grade of this draft, and some might call it a reach. I don't think he was going to be available at 223, and a guy whose profile, I think, and a spot where I'm comfortable drafting a running back. I don't like drafting running backs early. that's a spot where it almost doesn't matter. And especially a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield. We're making good time on this one. I gotta start filibustering a little bit just to really piss people off. All right, so now we're in a tough spot in the draft because it's certainly an area where I'm not like the most familiar. I like Clay Webb. Let's see the. Okay, my guy's still there. We're gonna find a guy. We're gonna find best player available here at. Or the best player that we want, I guess. That's the. Zeke Biggers is still there. I'm a big Zeke Biggers fan. We're taking him. He's a guy that can play a little bit of nose tackle. We're going to get bad grades on these last two. I'm warning you folks because Zeke Biggers is there's like four maybe guys who are like true nose tackle bodies in this draft. I think Kenneth Grant is one of them, and my argument is that Kenneth Grant is like a 2.5 down nose tackle, which is pretty rare. Jonathan Hankins, I said, is a 1.5 down nose tackle. That's significantly more common. I would say Zeke Biggers is like a 2 down nose tackle. He's also a guy that maybe doesn't make the roster, but it's the 7th round. All right, so my final guy, my hipster, obscure pick, guy that I want the Seahawks to get on their roster and not risk losing to other teams in undrafted free agency, is a guy with, I think, a 9.96 or 9.97 relative athletic score. One of the most athletic players in this draft. A guy who's long arms, tall, big body, fast, jumps high. Isaiah Nair out of Nebraska. Another C+. My last two picks are... Go check him out. All the reports are... Route running needs a ton of work. But like natural hands, great athletic ability. I wonder about these guys playing at non-traditional passing schools. And let's take a look at our draft real quick while we have it up here. We get a B+ for Jihad Campbell, Ariante Ursary, who's a darling of mine, who I would love. I just hope ends up playing for the Seahawks. We get an A+ at 50. Landon Jackson. A guy that I like very much. Will Howard is who I am least enthusiastic about. Will Howard versus Quinn Ewers to me feels a little bit spiritually like Russell Wilson and Kirk Cousins did for me, where I liked both guys some, but I felt like Russ had limitations that were insurmountable. And I kind of think that about Will Howard too. However, he was probably the best guy available there, a guy that would be interesting to develop. Maybe I'm a coward for taking him and not just going 0 quarterbacks. Maybe if I had any balls, I would have taken Tate Ratledge there and moved on. Terrence Ferguson, I'm like neutral on that pick. Noel Williams, wish I would have taken a cornerback earlier. Brashard Smith, a darling. Zeke Biggers, a darling. Isaiah Nair, a darling of mine. Please, this is going to be out on this. I was going to say, please tell your friends, listen to the podcast, but I have a little more to tell you because I have some shows coming up, folks. I have some shows coming up. I will be headlining Bickerson's Brewhouse on May 17th, and I will be headlining Beat Drop Kitchen and Events Center in Lacey, Washington, March 24th. So come out to those. I'm trying this year to really bet on myself a little bit and promote my own shows and headline my own shows. So if you live in those areas, please come out. Tell me that you found out from the podcast. That's what I should probably do. I'll see if I can make a podcast promo code so you can get a discount for coming there from this podcast. And I will be back next week. I'll probably be back on Thursday. My kid is on spring break next week, so it'll be pre-recorded because we're going to be in Ocean Shores, and I don't want to try to battle Airbnb Wi-Fi and my wife's desire to have me with the family. But we're going to have a lot of stuff leading up to the draft. Try to get a couple guests on to talk more about it. Thank you for listening to this. Thank you for your comments. Please comment, subscribe, like, tell a friend, tell an enemy. I don't care. Thank you so much for being here, and I will talk